Chicago is the unfortunate poster child for failed liberal policies. The city hasn't had a Republican mayor since the 1920s. And once again, the verdict is in. Cook County, Illinois has surpassed 1,000 murders this year. That's the most since 1994. That number includes 777 in Chicago alone. Meanwhile, Democrat Mayor Lori Lightfoot is in Washington, D.C. discussing COVID and the Biden infrastructure bill. So how has Chicago gone so far off the rails? And why does this city keep voting for Democrats who keep making it worse? The party panel is back. Katie Pavlich, Marie Harf, and Dave Smith. Katie, these are shocking and sad numbers, but are they surprising?
Not surprising, but worse than usual. The #1 cause of death for young black men under the age of 40 is homicide, and much of it comes out of Chicago. Now, the mayor, Lori Lightfoot, has been it's very obvious that she's not interested in committing to solving this crisis, or at least trying to make the numbers go down. The Department of Justice under Joe Biden, with a lot of people who've claimed that they care about black lives, doesn't seem to be really doing anything to stop this from happening. They launched a program, dedicated to firearms tracking earlier this year. Clearly, that's not working, and they haven't made it a priority. But to your question about, well, why does Chicago continue to vote for Democrats? Democrats have a lock on every single institution in Chicago. It's a machine, and that's why you can't get a Republican to take back any of their political seats.
What about a libertarian, Dave?
Well, I mean, look, it's a tragedy what's going on. I mean, kids are growing up in these high crime neighborhoods. It's awful. And the criminals are responsible for the crimes that they commit. But as you know, Kennedy, I mean, look, for over 50 years, we have subsidized unemployment, not working, and single motherhood. We've subsidized, the worst type of behavior. We've subsidized breaking up families. On top of that, we've fought a war on drugs that has created enormous black markets where gangs thrive. On top of that, we hyper-regulate low job and trade markets with these licensing laws, making it harder for people to escape the poverty. On top of that, they have these abominations of public schools. Me or you would die before we would let our children be educated in these environments. On top of that, you have these gun control laws that essentially ensure that only the criminals have guns. On top of that, just a million policies. And on top of that, a culture that glorifies the gangster lifestyle. And this is the recipe that has resulted in this, and it's nothing good.
But, Marie, those are 3 libertarian solutions. You could just take 3 separate things that Dave Smith said, and you don't have to be a member of the Libertarian Party to know that people have the right to defend themselves. And when they don't have a gun at home, they have to call the police. When the police lose their funding, they're not going to be able to show up quickly. And so the neighborhoods that have the most crime are the ones that are the most underserved. Number 2, end the drug war. It is these drug transactions and the black market, which has allowed this kind of activity to thrive. And I think Dave hit on a really big one, which is school choice. And Democrat-led cities keep showing over and over and over again that no matter how much money you throw at public schools, they don't necessarily educate kids.
Well, Kennedy, I agree that we need to end the drug war. I've agreed with you on that for a long time. And we do have a gun problem in this country. We have a gun problem on the south side of Chicago, and we have it in our schools like we saw yesterday in Michigan, where yet again, 4 American teenagers were gunned down at school. So we have a gun problem. And look, one of the problems in Chicago is that there aren't any easy answers. Homicides are up in cities across the country that have cut police funding, and they're up in cities that have increased police funding. So that one issue isn't in itself explanatory for why we're seeing such an increase in homicides. There are a lot of factors. I think we've hit on some of them tonight, but the idea that there's some easy fix to this really difficult problem that's been getting worse over many years, it's just not out there. But look, our mayors need to do better. Washington, D.C. is an example of that as well. We've seen violence go up here that's quite concerning also.
I don't disagree with you, and I think part of the problem is there are no easy solutions, but there are some bold solutions. And there aren't a lot of politicians who are brave enough to do what really has to be done. They all talk a good game, but when they get in into office, all they want to do is be reelected, and it is business as usual, and they are beholden to these machines, and they are beholden to these unions, especially in places like Los Angeles and Seattle and Portland and Minneapolis and Chicago. And even though it results in tragedy, no one really wants to tackle the big structural problems that have brought us here. So I hope at some point, if it's not a libertarian by party, it's a libertarian at heart who really takes the government problems, pushes them aside, and allows for these solutions by, letting parents and markets dictate some of the things that will preserve these lives. Now, meanwhile, the Black Lives Matter movement is calling for a month-long boycott of white companies. In a statement on the BLM website, they wrote, "White supremacist capitalism invented policing, initially as a chattel slavery-era patty rollers, in order to protect its interests and put targets on the backs of black people. Black Xmas challenges us to shake off the chains of consumerism and step fully into our own collective power to build new traditions and run an offense as well as a defense." If the BLM leaders really wanted to end the so-called white supremacist capitalism, would they all get rid of their iPhones and cars? Or how about that $1.4 million home in a predominantly white neighborhood that the BLM executive bought, her third, in Los Angeles? It is fantastic to support black-owned businesses, particularly black-owned businesses that are owned by women whose incredible creativity beats all the odds to bring people exactly what they want and need. But can we all just agree this is not the way to do it, Katie?
Yeah, first of all, I don't know how saying you should boycott white businesses is not racist in itself, but their statement is exactly on brand with their own self-determined Marxism. They say that they are trained Marxists. Well, that statement definitely says that. But I am laughing at all of the corporations that gave Black Lives Matter billions of dollars. They all put out statements of virtue signaling about Black Lives Matter, and yet here they are, essentially getting boycotted by the same group that extorted billions of dollars from them. And they're saying that they should be torn down, and they're fine with taking their money, but they should be torn down and boycotted based on the color of the skin of the person who may be the CEO or who owns the company.
All right, so Dave, let me ask you this. What is a better system of transaction? Is it capitalism that lifts billions of people out of extreme poverty, or is it socialism that economically enslaves people for generations?
Yeah, well, I mean, even their initial problem is with the police, which is the enforcement agency of the state. So it's, to blame the market for the crimes of the state I don't know, that's some real socialist logic. But, if Black Lives Matter would have just picked one policy that would actually make a difference and gotten all behind that, and of course, as we said before, I mean, ending qualified immunity, actually holding killer cops accountable, ending the war on drugs, ending civil asset forfeiture, demilitarizing the police, like any number, just go down the libertarian platform. But instead, it always becomes this focus, whether it's the organization or the movement, this focus on racism or white supremacy, which they basically apply to everything. And so what ends up happening, for this huge Black Lives Matter movement, what reform has actually been passed that has made the lives of black people better? I mean, I know we got rid of Aunt Jemima, and that's a big deal, but like all these other policies still exist just about everywhere. And this is just silly. I don't know. The idea of like shopping at any business based on the race or gender of who runs the business or doesn't run the business, just reward merit. Go to the business that provides the service or good the best for you.
I was thinking about that the other night. Like, I miss a good old-fashioned meritocracy. It is so incredibly negative and divisive, Marie. Help me find the bright side.
Well, look, this organization called Black Lives Matter doesn't represent the whole movement, the whole, quest for racial justice. And I think that this boycott is stupid. But the silver lining here is what you already said. This holiday season, let's shop small. Let's take on this supply chain issue by shopping in our neighborhoods. Let's support minority and women-owned businesses. Let's shop in our neighborhoods and start to give money back to our communities. And maybe let's take that lesson from this that will help all of us get more gifts under our Christmas tree or our Hanukkah menorahs, and will help with some of our supply chain issues. And maybe that can be the positive message from this.
I can't wait to see
silly segment,
I
right?
can't
On
wait
the
to
silly,
see
not the segment, but the silly idea that this group put forward.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's utterly impossible, and it negates any forward momentum that we might have in terms of moving into a better direction and being able to talk about things regardless of our racial or ethnic background as a country, as individuals. But I like where your head is at, and as individuals, we are free to make those wonderful choices and support small businesses that give so much to their communities. Thank you so much, Katie, Dave, and Marie. This was such a smart person show.
Thanks, Kennedy.
I don't think they're going to let me host it again. You guys are awesome. Coming up. Thank you. What is the worst thing you've ever done after a breakup? If the next accusation is true, one woman has us beat by a mile. Kat Timp is here. She's going to break it all down and share her own breakup stories. That's next.